Jack was not looking for trouble that day. He had come to the outer rim planet of Varnock to buy spare parts for his old cargo ship. The streets of the market were loud and full of strange smells. Aliens traded spices, broken tech, and shady deals in every corner. But Jack kept his head down, just wanting to get what he needed and leave. As he turned into a narrow alley behind the market, the noise faded. It was quiet. Too quiet. A soft voice reached his ears. It wasn't a shout or a scream. It was a whisper, barely there. "Help!" Jack stopped walking. He looked around. Nothing but trash piles and old metal walls. Then he saw it. A rusty gate, half open, hanging off broken hinges. Something inside told him to turn around, but his feet moved forward, slowly, carefully. He stepped inside. It was dark and smelled like oil and blood. As his eyes adjusted, he saw metal cages stacked against the walls. Inside them were figures, small, thin, shaking alien girls, some young, some older, with chains around their ankles and collars on their necks. One of them had glowing blue eyes full of fear. Another hid her face under her arms. Jack's heart pounded. He was looking at a slave pen hidden behind the market. He had heard rumors of such things, but seeing it was different. One girl looked up and met his eyes. She didn't speak, but her eyes begged for help. Jack clenched his fists. This wasn't right. He had no weapon, no backup, and no plan. But something deep inside him said he couldn't walk away. Footsteps echoed from behind a metal door. Jack quickly stepped back, hiding behind a stack of crates. A tall alien guard entered, his skin like cracked stone. He grunted and walked past the cages, checking each lock. "Big auction tonight," the guard muttered to himself. "The rich scum will pay anything for rare girls." Jack felt sick. He stayed hidden until the guard left through the other door. Then he stepped closer to the cages again. "Can you understand me?" he whispered. A few of the girls nodded. "I'm going to help," he said. "I don't know how yet, but I will." One girl, older than the rest, stepped forward. She had silver hair and marks on her arms like burn scars. "You'll die if you try," she said quietly. "Many have tried, they always die." Jack looked at her. "Maybe," he said, "but I'm not many." He turned and left the cage room, stepping back into the alley. His heart was racing, his mind spinning with ideas. He couldn't fight all the guards, but maybe he didn't have to. Maybe he could outsmart them. He went back to the market and bought a black cloak and a fake ID chip. He would return tonight, posing as a buyer. He needed to get inside the auction, see how many guards were there, learn the layout, find the keys, and find a way out. As the suns began to set on Varnock, Jack sat in his ship staring at the metal floor. He was just one human. The auction was run by criminals, slavers, and killers. He had no reason to get involved. No one would blame him if he flew away. But when he closed his eyes, he saw the girl with blue eyes. The whisper, "Help," echoed again in his head. Jack stood up, pulled on the cloak, and grabbed his hidden knife. If he was going to do this, he had to do it right, and he had to do it tonight. The auction was in a warehouse near the docks. Guards stood at the entrance with scanners. Jack handed them his fake ID chip, heart pounding. They scanned it, looked at him, and waved him inside. Inside, he saw cages lined up under bright lights. Each one had a number, a price, and a tag showing species and age. Aliens in suits walked around, placing bids. The air was thick with perfume and greed. At the far end, the auction master stood on a platform, watching with a cold smile. Jack's jaw tightened. This wasn't just a crime. It was a business, and tonight, he was going to break it. Jack returned to the warehouse as the last sun dipped. Below the smoky skyline of Varnock, the auction was already buzzing with activity. Shadows moved between the flickering lights as buyers whispered and placed their secret bids. He wore the black cloak tight around him, trying to look like the other buyers. But inside, his hands were cold and his thoughts sharp. Every step he took inside the auction house reminded him why he came back. Cages lined the walls, each holding a scared face. Some aliens were young girls, barely old enough to speak. Others were older, but no less broken. They wore collars like pets, tags like property. Jack forced himself to look calm, to blend in, to not react. He walked past one cage and locked eyes with the same girl from earlier, the one with silver hair and quiet strength. Her gaze did not show hope, but it didn't look away either. She remembered him. That meant she still believed. Even a little. A short alien with 6 arms offered him a bidding tablet. Jack took it without a word, nodding like a regular buyer. The tablet showed the names, species, ages, and opening bids. Some were already tagged as sold. Others blinked red, waiting for the highest offer. Jack scrolled until he found the girl with silver hair. Name, Vera. Age, unknown. Species, half Tsunari. Starting bid, 12,000 credits. He didn't have that much, not even close, but he tapped place bid anyway, just to draw attention, just to stall. The moment he placed the bid, a voice behind him said coldly, "You shouldn't have done that." Jack turned slowly. A tall figure stood behind him, dressed in black armor with a golden stripe across the chest. A mask covered his face, and a blade rested across his back. The voice came through a speaker in the mask, harsh and full of anger. "She's mine," the man said. "Don't bid again." Jack kept his voice low. "Didn't know she was already claimed," he said. "I'll stay out of your way." The masked man stared at him for a long moment before walking off. Jack's hands tightened around the tablet. Who was that? A bounty hunter? A collector? Or worse, someone who wanted her for pain. He needed a new plan. He couldn't outbid everyone, he couldn't fight his way out, but maybe he didn't need to. Maybe he could fake a deal, create a distraction, and free them during the confusion. A voice on the speaker called, "Bidding, for lot 27, half Tsunari female, now at 13,000 credits." Jack didn't look up. He just kept walking through the crowd, pretending to lose interest. But his eyes kept track of every guard, every camera, and every exit. He found the supply door, near the back of the building, marked for staff only. It had a scanner pad and 2 guards nearby. Behind that door were the cage controls, the electric locks, the backup generators. If he could get in there, he could shut everything down. No keys, no cages, no auction. He left the building quietly and returned 30 minutes later, wearing a new disguise, a delivery jacket, dusty gloves, and a fake ID tag with maintenance tech written in red. He walked straight toward the back entrance, holding a broken crate. The guard stopped him. "Delivery?" one asked. "Late parts from Dock 7. Jack said, keeping his voice bored and tired. "For cooling units." The guard scanned his tag. It blinked green. They waved him in. Jack entered a hallway full of pipes, wires, and humming noise. He kept his head low and walked fast. He passed one room with screens showing camera feeds of every cage. Another door marked Power Control was locked by keypad. He knelt by it and pulled a small device from his boot. It was old but good, something he'd used to escape pirates years ago. He hooked it to the keypad and watched as it started breaking the code. 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 20. Click. The door opened. Inside was the main switchboard. Jack scanned it and found the section labeled Cage Locks. It had manual overrides. If he flipped them, the cages would open, but the alarm would go off too. He had to do it at the right moment. Back outside, the auction master was about to announce the final round of bidding. Guards moved closer to the cages, preparing the winners for transport. Vera stood silently in her cage, her eyes scanning the crowd. She was searching for him. Jack stood behind the cage walls now. Hidden in the shadows, he raised one hand slightly, just enough for her to see it. She blinked slowly, once, twice. She understood tonight. The deal wasn't made with credits or contracts. It was made with courage, silence, and timing. And when the lights would go dark, the locks would fall open. All that would be left was escape. The night air on Varnock was thick with smoke from the market fires. The streets were quieter now, but the auction house still glowed with lights. Inside, the trade of lives was reaching its final stage. Jack had no more time. If he was going to act, it had to be now. He moved through the back corridors, his cloak pulled tight. The plan he carried in his mind was dangerous, maybe even impossible, but it was the only chance the captives had. He reached the control room door again, the old device in his hand, buzzed and cracked the lock open in seconds. Inside, the humming of power units filled the room. Rows of switches, glowing panels, and wires covered the walls. He scanned quickly. The cage locks were tied to this panel, but the alarms were hardwired too. If he cut the wrong wire, he would fry the whole system and kill the power for the entire block. If he did nothing, the slaves would be gone forever. His breath slowed, his hands steady. He flipped the safety override. At first, nothing happened. Then he heard it, the click of locks disengaging. Somewhere far away, cages were opening, but right behind it came the sound he dreaded, the alarm. A red light flashed across the panel. Sirens wailed through the building. Guards shouted and ran. Jack grabbed the small blaster he had hidden in his cloak. It wasn't much, but it could buy time. He slipped out of the control room and moved toward the cages. The buyers were already in chaos. Some tried to run, others pulled out weapons. The slaves were confused. Some too weak to move, others pushing at the doors. Go, Jack whispered, rushing to the nearest cage. A child stumbled out, eyes wide with fear. He caught her and pushed her toward the side exit. Follow the tunnel. Keep low, he said. More cages opened. More voices cried out. The whole place was breaking apart. Then the masked man appeared, the same one who had warned Jack earlier. His blade was already drawn, glowing with energy. He cut down a guard who got in his way, then turned toward Jack. You again? The voice growled through the mask. You did this, Jack raised his blaster. Yeah, he said. I did. The man moved like lightning. The blade striking, Jack barely dodged. The heat of the weapon brushing past his face. He fired his blaster, the shot bouncing off the man's armor. The fight was hopeless. But Jack didn't need to win. He just needed to stall. Behind him, Vera stepped out of her cage. Her silver hair caught the light, her scars visible. She held two of the younger girls close, keeping them safe. Her eyes locked on Jack. For a moment, something unspoken passed between them. Get them out, Jack shouted. She shook her head. No, not without you, she said, her voice strong even in the chaos. The masked man lunged again. Jack rolled aside, pulling a crate down to block the strike. Sparks flew as the blade cut through metal like paper. Guards poured in from every corner now, stun rifles ready. The auction master screamed at them to capture the slaves, not kill them. Profits first, he shouted. The children cried. The weaker captives stumbled and fell. Jack's heart twisted. He couldn't protect them all, not like this. But then he saw the waste tunnel, half hidden behind a pile of boxes. It led outside, maybe to freedom. That was their only chance. He grabbed Vera's arm. There, arm, he pointed. Get them out through that tunnel. She hesitated only a moment, then nodded. She shouted something in her own language. The girls moved, carrying each other, helping the ones who couldn't walk. Jack fired again, forcing the guards back. But one blast hit his leg, dropping him to the ground. Pain shot through him. He crawled behind cover, gritting his teeth. The masked man closed in. Pathetic, the voice said. One human against a house of hunters. Jack aimed. His blaster again. Maybe, he said. But one human is enough. He fired at the fuel pipes above. The shot hit, sparks rained, and flames erupted. The guards scattered. The buyers screamed. The whole building shook as fire spread across the ceiling. Smoke filled the air. The masked man cursed and stepped back, shielding his eyes. Jack pushed himself up, limping toward the tunnel. Vera was at the entrance, her hand stretched toward him. Come, she shouted. He stumbled forward, every step heavy. Behind him, the auction house burned, alarms screamed, and chains broke. Ahead, the tunnel waited, dark and narrow but full of hope. He reached her hand, and together they disappeared into the shadows. The slaves followed behind, frightened but free. The night of the auction was over, but their fight for freedom had just begun. The tunnel was dark and narrow, the air heavy with dust and old oil. Jack leaned against the damp wall, his leg throbbing from the blaster wound. The freed slaves followed close behind, their footsteps echoing in the silence. Some of them were crying softly, others too weak to even make a sound. But they all moved forward, because stopping meant being caught. Vera walked beside Jack, holding one girl's hand while keeping an eye on him. Her silver hair glowed faintly in the dim light. Her scars stood out, but her steps were steady. She carried herself like someone who had been broken before but refused to stay broken. She glanced at Jack's bleeding leg and whispered, "You can't keep walking like this." Jack gave her a tight smile. "I'll walk until we're out," he said. Her eyes narrowed, but she didn't argue. Instead, she put the smallest child on her back and gestured for the others to stay close. Behind them, faint shouts echoed through the tunnel. The guards had found the hidden path. The sound of boots on metal grew louder. Jack cursed under his breath. "We don't have much time," he said. They reached a section where the tunnel split into two. One path sloped upward, the other deeper into the underground. Jack frowned. "I don't know which way," he admitted. Vera closed her eyes for a moment, touching the wall. "The air," she whispered. "The left one smells fresher. That way leads up." They turned left, moving faster despite the pain. In Jack's leg, the children stumbled, but the older ones helped the younger. It was a sight that filled Jack with both pride and anger. Pride because they still fought to survive. Anger because they had been forced to. The tunnel narrowed even more. They had to walk single file now. Jack moved to the back, blaster ready to slow anyone who followed. His hands shook from blood loss, but his eyes stayed sharp. Every shadow looked like an enemy, every sound like danger. At last they reached a section blocked by a solid metal wall. The children gasped, fear rising in their voices. "It's a dead end," one whispered. "No," Jack said firmly. "There's always a way." He stepped forward, examining the wall. Rust covered it, cracks running along the edges. He picked up a broken pipe from the floor and slammed it against the weak spot. The tunnel filled with sharp clangs. Vera joined. Him, her hands striking the wall with strength Jack hadn't expected. The wall groaned and finally broke open, revealing a faint light beyond. Cool night air rushed in, fresh and clean compared to the tunnel stench. The children gasped in relief. Freedom was right there, but behind them the shouts grew louder. Boots slammed against the ground. Echoing closer, Jack turned, blaster ready. "Go," he said. "Take them out first." Vera hesitated, but the children pulled her forward. She guided them through the gap, one by one, until only Jack remained. A guard appeared at the far end. Rifle raised, Jack fired first, hitting the wall above the man's head. The shot sparked, making the guard duck. Another guard came, then another. Jack fired again, forcing them to take cover. He was running out of power cells fast. "Jack!" Vera's voice came from the outside, urgent and sharp. He glanced back at the gap, light pouring through. "Go!" she shouted. "Now!" He limped toward the hole, firing one last shot to keep the guards back. Then he squeezed through the broken wall, collapsing onto the grass outside. The night sky stretched above them, filled with stars and the glowing rings of Varnock. The children huddled together, eyes wide with wonder and fear. For some, it was the first time they had seen the sky in years. Jack lay on the ground, chest rising and falling. He felt the cold grass beneath his hands and smiled weakly. They had made it out, but the danger wasn't over. The sound of sirens carried. Through the air more guards would come, hunters too. The auction house would not let their profits slip away so easily. Jack knew they needed to keep moving. Vera crouched beside him, her hand glowing faintly with strange light. "Hold still," she said, placing her palm over his wound. Heat spread through his leg, not painful, but warm, almost soothing. The bleeding slowed. The pain eased. Jack looked at her in shock. You can heal?" Vera shook her head. "Not fully," she said, "but I can help enough." Her eyes met his, and for a moment the world seemed to grow quiet. "You risked your life for us," she whispered. "Why?" Jack exhaled. "Because someone had to," he said simply. "And no one else was going to." The children gathered around them, watching silently. One small girl tugged on Jack's sleeve. "Captain," she whispered shyly, "what do we do now?" Jack looked at the sky, then back at the frightened faces. His ship was nearby, hidden in a junkyard at the edge of the docks. If they could reach it, they might escape the planet. But first, they had to cross open ground, and the hunters were already on their way. Jack pushed himself up slowly, leaning on the pipe like a cane. "We move," he said. "We don't stop until we're safe." Vera nodded, her silver hair catching the moonlight. The children rose to their feet, some limping, some holding each other. They were weak, but together they looked stronger. The tunnel had given them a chance, but the real escape was only beginning, and Jack knew this night was far from over. The night air was colder when they reached the edge of the city. Beyond the broken walls and empty streets stood a wide junkyard, filled with old ships, scrap piles, and metal carcasses of machines long forgotten. Jack limped at the back, using the pipe like a cane, while Vera led the frightened children ahead. The place smelled of rust and fuel, but it was dark and full of places to hide. For now, it was their only chance. Jack knew this junkyard better than most. His ship was hidden here, buried under metal sheets and scraps. But reaching it without being caught was the real challenge. The sound of engines already roared in the distance. The hunters were coming fast. "Spread out," Jack whispered. "Stay low. Don't make a sound." The children crouched behind piles of metal, eyes wide and glowing faintly in the moonlight. Vera crouched near him, her silver hair shining even in the shadows. Her hand rested on the ground as if she was feeling the earth itself. "They're close," she whispered. "Too close." Jack forced himself to stand straighter, his blaster in one hand, his pipe in the other. He scanned the junkyard carefully. If he could turn this place into a trap, they might survive. He spotted 2 old fuel tanks leaning against each other. A few wires and sparks could turn them into a deadly explosion. "Help me," he told Vera, pointing at the tanks. She nodded, quickly guiding the children into deeper cover while Jack worked. His hands shook as he connected wires, his mind racing. He had only one shot at this. Literally, if the hunters stepped into the wrong spot, the whole yard would go up in flames. The sound of boots on metal reached them. Shadows moved across the junkyard, flashlights cutting through the darkness. The guards spread out, rifles ready, searching for movement. Jack hid behind a pile of broken wings, his blaster aimed. He whispered to himself, "Come closer. Just a little closer." One guard stepped. Too near the fuel tanks, Jack fired, hitting the tank dead center. The explosion ripped through the yard, fire lighting up the night. The guard flew backward screaming, while others scrambled in panic. The children gasped, but Vera kept them quiet. Smoke filled the air, covering their escape route. But the victory was short. More guards poured in, some wearing heavier armor. Jack fired again, dropping one, but his blaster clicked empty. He cursed and threw it aside, gripping the pipe tighter. A guard charged at him. Rifle raised, Jack swung the pipe, smashing it into the guard's helmet. The man crumpled, but 2 more came from behind. Vera appeared then, moving faster than Jack thought possible. Her hand glowed faintly, and with a sudden motion, fire leapt from her palm. The flames struck the guards, forcing them back in fear. The children stared in shock. Vera had revealed what she had hidden for so long, her power. Jack looked at her, stunned. You're not just—" "I am different," she interrupted, her eyes glowing. "That's why they wanted me." The guards shouted orders, focusing their fire on her. Bullets and plasma shots tore through the junk piles, sparks flying everywhere. Vera raised both hands, sending out a wall of fire that shielded the children. But the effort drained her quickly, her knees shaking. Jack rushed to her side, blocking a strike with his pipe. "Don't push yourself too far," he shouted. She glanced at him, sweat dripping down her face. "I won't stop, not while they're still in danger." More guards rushed in, forcing Jack and Vera to fight side by side. Jack swung, punched, and blocked, his body screaming. With pain, Vera struck with bursts of flame, her power wild and fierce. Together they held the line, but the numbers were endless. One child cried out when a guard grabbed her arm. Jack dove forward, tackling the guard and pulling the girl free. "Stay with the others," he ordered, his voice breaking. The junkyard turned into a battlefield. Smoke, fire, and screams filled the air. Jack's chest burned with exhaustion, his leg bleeding again, but when he looked at the children huddled together, refusing to leave, each other behind, he found new strength. He roared and swung the pipe again, forcing the enemy back step by step. Then the masked man appeared once more, stepping through the fire as if it were nothing. His blade glowed, his presence colder than death itself. "You're stubborn, human," the voice came through the mask. "But this ends now." Jack raised his pipe, teeth clenched. "Then come and end it," he spat back. The masked man charged. His blade striking with deadly precision, Jack blocked with the pipe, sparks flying. The force almost knocking him down, he staggered but held his ground. The masked man pressed forward, faster, stronger, relentless. But Jack refused to fall. Every time he blocked, every time he struck back, he thought of the children. He thought of freedom. The fight raged, metal clashing against energy. Finally, with one desperate swing, Jack knocked the masked man's blade aside. But before he could strike again, the man vanished into the smoke. "Next time," the voice promised. Echoing through the flames, the guards began to retreat, their morale broken. The junkyard was a ruin of fire and wreckage. Jack dropped to his knees, gasping for breath. Vera collapsed beside him, her power spent. The children rushed to them, hugging them tightly, their eyes wet with tears. For a moment they were safe. But Jack knew this was only a pause, not the end. The enemy would come again, stronger. He looked toward the hidden corner of the junkyard where his ship was buried. Their only hope now was to reach it before the hunters returned. The junkyard still burned, flames crackling against the night sky. The air smelled of smoke and scorched metal. Jack leaned against a broken wing of an old starship, his chest heaving, his leg bleeding again. The children huddled close together, their eyes wide, their bodies trembling. Vera knelt beside them, her silver hair damp with sweat, her hands glowing faintly in the dark. She placed her palms on Jack's wound. Heat spread across his leg, warm and steady, slowing the bleeding. Jack winced but didn't pull away. "You saved them," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "That fire, it came from you." Vera's eyes lowered, shame flickering in her expression. "I am not supposed to exist," she said quietly. "I am half Tsunari, half elemental. My kind is forbidden, hunted, and sold." Her voice trembled, but there was strength under the sorrow. "They called me dangerous, they locked me in chains, but I survived." Jack studied her face, the scars, the pain behind her glowing eyes. "You're not dangerous," he said firmly. "You're powerful and you used it to protect them." Vera shook her head. "You don't understand, human. The fire inside me is alive. It burns hotter the more I use it. If I lose control, I could destroy everyone around." "Me." A silence hung heavy in the junkyard, broken only by the crackle of fire. The children looked at her with awe, not fear. One little girl whispered, "You saved us. You're like a star." The words brought a small, broken smile to Vera's lips. But the moment of peace ended when engines roared in the distance. Jack forced himself to stand, leaning on his pipe. "They're coming back," he said, his jaw tight. He glanced at the pile of scrap where his ship was hidden. "It's not far. If we reach it, we can get off this rock." But his eyes met Vera's, and he saw the truth. They wouldn't all make it without help. The children were weak, some injured, some too young to run fast. Jack knew he couldn't fight like before. His body was breaking down. But Vera was different. Her fire had shaken the hunters. It could protect them again. "You'll have to lead them," Jack said, his voice heavy. Vera frowned. "And what about you?" Jack gave a half smile. "I'll buy time, I'm good at that." "No," she said sharply, her eyes flashing. "I will not leave you behind, not after what you've done." Her voice shook with something more than anger, something human, something fragile. Jack sighed. "Listen, if they catch you, they'll never stop hunting the kids, but if you make it to my ship, you'll have a chance. I'll meet you there, I promise." Vera's hands tightened into fists. She wanted to argue, but the children were watching her, waiting, trusting. Her heart burned heavier than her fire. She finally nodded, her voice low. If you break your promise, human, I will drag you back myself. Jack chuckled weakly. Fair enough. He gave her the small remote to his ship. Dock 7, hidden, under the hull of a red freighter. Press this and the ship will reveal itself. Vera took it, her fingers brushing his, her eyes locking with his for one brief, fierce moment. Then she turned, gathering the children, leading them quietly through the smoking wreckage. Jack watched them disappear into the shadows. His chest tightened, not from the wound, but from the fear he might not see them again. He gripped his pipe tighter, stepping into the center of the junkyard. The glow of headlights appeared, armored vehicles rolling in, hunters and guards poured out, rifles raised. Jack shouted into the night, his voice echoing, "You want them? You'll have to go through me." The hunters spread out, circling him. One laughed. "One broken human against all of us, easy money." Jack smirked, his eyes hard. "You don't know humans very well." He swung his pipe, smashing a guard's rifle aside. Another charged, and Jack slammed the metal into his chest. Pain ripped through his leg, but he kept moving. Every strike, every block, he thought of the children. He thought of Vera, of the promise he made. Meanwhile, Vera led the children through the maze of scrap. But the fire inside her was restless, calling to be unleashed. She felt it burning in, her chest, in her veins, in her soul. The fear of losing control gnawed at her, but the sound of Jack fighting behind them made her decision clear. She stopped, turning toward the battle. The children clutched her arms. "Don't go back," they cried. She smiled sadly. "I am not leaving him, and I am not leaving you to face this alone." Her body shook, her eyes blazing with light. She raised her hands and fire erupted into the sky. The junkyard lit up like a second sun, flames swirling around her. The hunters froze, blinded by the sudden inferno. Jack staggered back, shielding his face from the heat. Vera walked forward, her steps slow, steady, powerful. The fire danced with her movements, wrapping around her like armor. The guards shouted in panic, their rifles useless against the storm. Some dropped their weapons, others fled. The masked man appeared again, watching her with cold fury. "So the fire awakens," he growled. Vera's voice rang out like thunder. "I am not your property. I am not your weapon. I am free." The flames surged outward, a wave of heat forcing the hunters back. The night shook with her power. Jack stared at her, stunned. The fire within her was no curse. It was hope. The junkyard glowed like a battlefield under two moons. Flames tore through piles of broken ships and twisted metal. The hunters stumbled back, blinded by the wave of fire that Vera unleashed. The air shimmered with heat, and the ground shook with the force of her power. Jack stood at the edge of the blaze, barely holding himself upright, his pipe still gripped tight. The masked man stepped forward, his blade humming with energy. He moved through the flames as if they feared him. His voice carried above the roar of fire. "You cannot hide, half-breed, you cannot run, you belong in chains." Vera's eyes blazed brighter than the fire around her. "I belong to no one," she shouted, her voice echoing across the burning yard. She raised both hands, and a wall of fire surged toward the masked man. He sliced through it with his blade, sparks flying. The clash of power against steel lit the night like lightning. The ground cracked beneath their feet. Jack staggered forward, his body aching but his spirit unbroken. He shouted at the children, "Go! Head for the ship!" They hesitated, clutching each other. But Vera turned her head for a moment, her expression fierce yet gentle. "Do as he says, little stars. Freedom is waiting." The children ran, their small figures disappearing into the shadows of the scrap. Mazed, Jack felt relief even as his strength waned. At least they would reach the ship, at least they had a chance. Now all that remained was holding off the hunters long enough for escape, and facing the masked man who refused to yield. The duel between Vera and the masked man raged like a storm. Fire lashed against the glowing blade, sending sparks across the junkyard. Every strike shook the ground, every blast of heat cracked the air. Jack watched, awe mixing with dread. He had never seen such power, not from any human or alien before, but Vera was tiring. Her breaths came heavy. Her flames flickered with strain. The masked man pressed forward, his strikes ruthless and precise. "You burn bright, girl," he growled, "but every fire dies." His blade swung down toward her chest. Jack didn't think. He threw himself forward, pipe raised, blocking the strike. The impact sent pain through his arms, his knees buckled. But he held for one breath. One heartbeat he held. Vera's eyes widened, fire surging back to life in her veins. She screamed, a sound that shook the night. Her flames exploded outward, engulfing the masked man in a whirlwind of heat. He staggered, his armor glowing red, cracks forming across the mask. For the first time, Jack saw him falter. "You fight for money," Vera shouted, her voice like thunder. "I fight for freedom." Her flames roared higher, wrapping around the masked man. His scream tore through the blaze, full of rage and pain. Then he vanished into the fire, swallowed whole. Silence fell, broken only by the crackling flames. Vera dropped to her knees, her fire fading, her body trembling with exhaustion. Jack limped to her side, pulling her close. "You did it," he whispered, his voice rough. "You burned it all down." She leaned against him, her eyes half closed. "I almost lost control." Jack smiled weakly, brushing soot from her face. Sometimes losing control is the only way to win. He lifted her too, her feet, his body screaming in pain. "Come on, we're not done yet. We need to reach the ship." They stumbled together through the burning wreckage. At the far edge of the junkyard, the children waited by the buried ship. When they saw Jack and Vera, their faces lit up with hope. One small girl ran forward, hugging Vera's leg. "You came back," she whispered, her voice full of wonder. Jack pressed the remote into Vera's hand. She clicked it, and the ground trembled as hidden panels shifted. The old freighter rose from beneath the scrap, its hull scarred but alive. The ramp opened with a hiss, light spilling into the night. The children rushed aboard, their chains gone, their voices trembling with joy. Jack and Vera followed last. He collapsed into the pilot's chair, his leg bleeding again. His hands shook as he started the engines. The ship roared, firelight reflecting off its hull. The junkyard and the city beyond burned behind them. As the freighter lifted into the sky, sirens blared across Varnock. But it was too late. The slaves were gone. The auction was destroyed. The signal Jack sent from the console carried across the stars, proof of the slavers' crimes. A call for justice. In the silence of space, Jack leaned back, exhausted. The children huddled together in the cargo bay, whispering softly. Vera sat beside him, her silver hair glowing faintly in the ship's lights. She placed her hand over his, her voice low but steady. "You gave us freedom, human. Now you are our captain." Jack looked at her, then at the children. For the first time in years, he felt something more than survival. He felt purpose. He smiled faintly, his voice rough but strong. "Then let's find a home." The stars stretched endless before them, and though the fire of the auction still burned in their memories, what burned brighter was hope. The night they escaped was not the end. It was only the beginning.